All right, let's start this again. I am out here. We're going to read Sir Gibbie. It's raining. It was raining this morning a lot last night. And so the trails are over there. And the ocean's right there where we usually are, way on top of those hills. And anyway, I found a bench. And so we're going to start. We're reading Sir Gibbie. It is a book by George MacDonald from the 1800s. And we're somewhat into it. I have Leia here too. We'll see if she shows herself. Leia, come around. She's playing. Our guard dog. She's little. And anyway, George MacDonald was C.S. Lewis's spiritual mentor. C.S. Lewis said every book he ever wrote, he quoted George MacDonald either directly or indirectly. Never was there an author more closely knit to the spirit of Christ. And so I welcome all people of all religions. This is a book from the 1800s that I'm a psychologist in my day job, and I found this book to be, here's Leia, quite transformative. Let's see. They're really, really transformative in my own growth and my own life. And so sometimes we can't just hear someone talking to us about psychology or the spiritual path or whatever. We need to hear it in a story, and then we connect to it, and it helps us grow and transform. All right. Let's see. I'm going to do this so that Leia doesn't keep knocking over the stand that I got. I used to just put my phone on the bushes and all sorts of things. I always just wanted that motto, just leave the house, don't bring anything. Because sometimes we can overpack in life, if you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I was just reflecting on that verse on the way here. Just, God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. 2 Timothy 1:7, I think. And Psalm 37, fret not thyself because of evildoers. Put your trust in God. God will sort it out. Basically, that's what it's saying. Otherwise, if you're worried about it and you're fretting about it and you're angry about it and you don't release all that anger to God, then it says you'll be tempted to do something evil and you don't want to, Wow. All right, I'm just observing some ants. I was thinking about ants on the way over here. How we could fret ourselves. Look, there's little, I don't know. I'm not going to show you. Don't think so. I don't want to take my phone off and stuff, but there's little ants right over there by a trash can. And it's like, we could fret ourselves about ants coming into our house if we don't know how to take care of them until we learn how to take care of them. But God gives us a creative solution. God rest the soul of Nathan. There's this guy, I think that was his name, that helped me with my ant problem one time, and he's passed away recently. He's very young. He's much younger than me. But I remember he helped me with my ant problem. Anyway, Leia. Shh, shh, shh. Morning. Come on, Leia. This isn't our space. This is everyone's. Some guy's just jogging through this back path because the path is closed up there. All right, let's start. Okay, I do this to show. Here, we're starting the book already. Sometimes I chat a little bit at the beginning. Leia, I don't know how you're going to get untied. Come on. She's all tied up now. Chapter 15, Donald Grant. Oh, this is such a wonderful part. Well, I mean the Donald Grant part. There's, okay, so he says, Just settle yourself in. Let go of all distractions, and now we get this chance to enter into this book again. I was looking forward to it all morning, but I always want to try my best to be present where I am. It's like, no, this moment can be just as good as this next one where we're reading Sir Gibbie. Anyway, hungering minds come of peasant people as often as of any, and have appeared in Scotland. Hold on. Leia, no, come here. You got yourself twisted. 1 second. So, George MacDonald's the Scottish writer. Hold on, Leia. Oh my gosh. Leia, stop. Oh, shoot. 1 second. 1 second, everyone. I don't edit these because if I do, I have to do all this stuff to render it and put it back together. And I hardly do that unless I have to, unless somehow I get a call that the Do Not Disturb didn't work or whatever. I do that for you all as a gift of love. But I've not got paid for this for 5.5 years. I've been doing this. And so you can pray that the algorithms change, or you guys share this to 1,000 people each, or something happens, because I've just had to surrender it to God 1,000,000 times because I don't understand. I would love to make an income from this, but I'm not doing it for that. Anyway, that's just a side note. Maybe Leia needed to get tangled up so I would say something like that. All right. Hungering minds come of peasant people as often as of any, and have appeared in Scotland as often, I fancy, as in any nation. Not every Scotsman, therefore, who may not himself have known one like Donald, will refuse to believe in such a hard laddie. Besides, there are still those in Scotland, as well as in other nations, to whom the simple and noble, not the commonplace and selfish, is the true type of humanity. Of such as Donald, whether English or Scottish, is the class coming up to preserve the honour and truth of our Britain, to be the oil of the lamp of her life. When those who place their glory in knowledge or in riches shall have passed from her history as the smoke from her chimneys. Wow. So it's not just the knowledgeable. And it's cold, so I wore my sweatshirt again that's covered with kisses. It says in the scriptures, greet each other with a holy kiss. All right, and so I don't have to justify everything. I don't know why God. Well, we know. If you were here with me like 3 videos ago, 3 hours ago of reading, I wore this the first day I got it, and I didn't know why I got it because anyway. But Sir Gibbie got his first kiss. He got a kiss. This dog was just kissing him and loving him because he had to sleep in a doghouse one time because he was so poor. But anyway, you can go back if you didn't get to watch that with us. It was so beautiful, and I was so touched that I was wearing this funny sweatshirt, right? Anyway, I brought this bottle of water for the dog, just in case. All right, listen to the birds. Cheap as education then was in Scotland, the parents of Donald Grant had never dreamed of sending a son to college. It was difficult for them to save even the few quarterly shillings that paid the fees of the parish schoolmaster for Donald. For Donald, indeed, they would have failed even in this, but for the help of his brothers and sisters afforded. After he left school, however, and got a place as herd, as a herd boy, he was taking care of these cows, remember? But even if you're just here just now, don't just trust it, totally trust it, because we're going to be nourished by this chapter, these chapters that are read today. And this nature and whatever God is speaking through me, I trust that for you. God wants always to serve your heart. Jesus said, I came to heal the brokenhearted, and so he's doing that always. If we yield to him, he's doing that always through us. Anyway, after he left school, however, and got a place as herd, he fared better than any of the rest. For at the Mains, that's the main house, right? He found a friend and helper in Fergus Duff, his master's second son, who was then at home from college, which he had now attended 2 winters, partly that he was delicate in health, partly that he was something of a fine gentleman. He took no share with his father and elder brother in the work of the farm, although he was at the Mains from the beginning of April to the end of October. He was a human kind of soul, notwithstanding, and would have been much more of a man if he had thought less of being a gentleman. He keeps trying to be his idea of a gentleman. We'll see, you'll see. I love this background. That's why wow. It's like a Van Gogh painting. Okay, excuse me. If he had thought less of being a gentleman, he had taken a liking to Donald, and having found in him a strong desire after every kind of knowledge, of which he himself had any share, had sought to enliven the tedium of an existence rendered not a little flabby from want of sufficient work, by imparting to him of the treasures he had gathered. They were not great, and he could never have carried him, and he could never have carried him far, for he was himself only a respectable student, not a little lacking in perseverance, and given to dreaming dreams, of which he was himself the hero. Happily, however, Donald was of another sort, and from the first needed but to have the outermost shell of a thing broken for him, and that Fergus could do. By and by, Donald would break a shell for himself. But perhaps the best thing Fergus did for him was the lending him books. Donald had an altogether unappeasable hunger after every form of literature with which he had as yet made acquaintance, and this hunger Fergus fed with the books of the house, and many besides of such as he purchased or borrowed for his own reading. These last chiefly poetry. But Fergus Duff, while he revelled in the writings of certain of the poets of the age, was incapable of finding poetry for himself in the things around him. Donald Grant, on the other hand, while he seized on the poems Fergus lent him, with an activity even greater than his, received from the nature around him influence similar to those which exhaled from the words of the poet. And some of these, in some sense, then, Donald was original. That is, he received at first hand what Fergus required to have put on him. To quote Celia in As You Like It, as pigeons feed their young, they take the food and have to give it to their young. Donald could make it, but Fergus could not. So, and anyway, I won't give away. Anyway, I was going to say so far, but I don't need to say that. Okay. Therefore, fiercely as it would have harrowed the pride of Fergus to be informed of the fact, he was in the kingdom of art only as one who ate of what fell from the table, while his father's herd boy was one of the family. That's a reference. You can read the scripture when the woman comes and asks Jesus, please heal my daughter. She's afflicted by demons. Heal her. And some say it was to cause her to persevere more, or to speak that he was come for the children of Israel first. Or I won't get into all of that politics. But anyway, he says it's not right for the master to give the food that's meant for the children over to the dogs, and some say the dogs are like your sinful nature, and you're not meant to feed all the passions with your main food. You're meant to nourish your soul and, walk on this narrow path. And so, and she said something like, nevertheless, Lord, even the dogs eat the scraps off the table, let my daughter be healed. And she was healed. And so this woman persevered. And so we're called to persevere, even if the world calls us dogs and doesn't understand or whatever. But anyway, he's saying here, Donald ate off the Father's table directly because he went direct to the Father, the creator of all, who loves us, who gives straight to us. It says, my sheep hear my voice in John 10. Anyway, I won't make this a teaching video, don't worry. Okay. I have plenty of those. There's like 1,700, I think. It's so funny because I have a video for each subscriber right now. And it's been like that for a long time. I wonder if it means anything. Who knows? Each person could have their own video right now. The people that are subscribed. Feel free to subscribe, follow, and like, and all that. Because it does help. And when you comment, it helps the algorithm as well. But God is bigger than the algorithm, so I'm not beholden to it. It's just part of this. Anyway. While his father's herd boy was one of the family, this was as far from Donald's thought, however, as from that of Fergus. The condescension, therefore, of the latter did not impair the gratitude for which the former had such large reason, and Donald looked up to Fergus as to one of the lords of the world, with a lowercase l, like he is at college, he gets all the schooling that Donald's family can't afford, hardly the primary school they couldn't. To find himself now in the reverse relation of superior and teacher to the little outcast, right? He's talking about Sir Gibbie, whose whole worldly having might be summed in the statement that he was not absolutely naked, and this boy was almost naked. Like, that's all he had, was this poor bit of a scrap of these overall things that were wrapped around him, passed down from I don't know where. That's all it looked like Sir Gibbie had on his body, right? And Donald saw in him that he knew something more than Donald ever learned. Anyway, woke in Donald and altogether and strange feeling, yet gratitude to his master had but turned itself round and become tenderness to his pupil. Wow. So now Sir Gibbie is like the pupil to Donald, as Donald was to Fergus. After Donald left him in the field, and while he was ministering first to his beasts, to the cattle, right, then to himself, Gibbie lay on the grass, as happy as child could well be. A loving hand laid on his feet or legs would have found them like ice. But where was the matter so long as he never thought of them? He could have supped a huge bicker of sowens and eaten a dozen potatoes, but of what mighty consequence is hunger, so long as it neither absorbs the thought nor causes faintness, right? God says when you fast, put oil on your head so people don't know you're fasting. This is a psychological way Sir Gibbie's doing it, right? Because he's not worried about his hunger right now, or that he could go try to find some potatoes in the field or wherever he found them, in the ground, Or his I got my wool hat and my sweatshirt and all this stuff, my raincoat. But he's just not worried about it, so he can be present with what the Creator was showing him, even though he's not even calling him the Creator. Leia, come back over here. Leia, come here. Come on. You're tangled up again. Good girl. There you go. All right. But of what mighty consequence is hunger, so long as it neither absorbs the thought nor causes faintness? The sun, however, was going down behind a great mountain, and its huge shadow, made of darkness and haunted with cold, came sliding across the river and over valley and field, nothing staying in its silent wave, until it covered Gibbie with the blanket of the dark, under which he could not long forget that he was in a body to which cold is unfriendly. At the first breath of the night wind that came after the shadow, he shivered and, starting to his feet, began to trot, increasing his speed until he was scudding up and down the field like a wild thing of the night, whose time was at hand, waiting until the world should lie open to him. Suddenly he perceived that the daisies, which all day long had been facing the sun, like true souls confessing to the Father of them, had folded their petals together to points, and held them like spearheads tipped with threatening crimson against the onset of the night and her shadows, while within its white cone each folded in the golden heart of its life, until the great Father should return and, shaking the wicked out of the folds of the night, render the world once more safe with another glorious day. Wow, it's 21:21 when I said that. I don't know. God is so good that, the sun is not out right now, but it'll come back out. I trust it will. And it is in heaven already. Christ, it says, is the light of heaven. In Revelation, I think it says that. Gibbie gazed and wondered, and while he gazed, slowly, glidingly, back to his mind came the ghost mother of the ballad, because Donald had read him a poem and it transposed him. It was amazing. Anyway, and in every daisy he saw her folding her neglected orphans to her bosom, while the darkness and the misery rolled by defeated. He wished he knew a ghost that would put her arms round him. Wow, don't we all wish that? He must have had a mother once, he supposed, but he could not remember her, and of course she must have forgotten him. He did not know that about him were folded the everlasting arms of the great, the one ghost, which is the death of death, the death of death, right? The life and soul of all things and all thoughts. So we are being ever held in the arms of God and covered with kisses like my sweatshirt. The kisses of God, the Creator. We saw that in that video where it came up. The death of death, the life and soul of all things and all thoughts. The presence indeed was with him, and he felt it, but he knew it only as the wind and shadow, the sky, and closed daisies. In all these things and the rest, it took shape that it might come near him. Yea, the presence, with a capital P, see? It's right here. Was in his very soul, else he could never have rejoiced in friend, or desired ghost to mother him. Still he knew not the presence, but it was drawing nearer and nearer to his knowledge, even in sun and air and night and cloud, in beast and flower and herd boy, until at last it would reveal itself to him, in him, as life himself. Then the man would know that in which the child had rejoiced. The stars came out, to Gibbie the heavenly herd, feeding at night and gathering gold in the blue pastures. He saw them looking up from the grass where he had thrown himself to gaze more closely at the daisies, and the sleep that pressed down his eyelids seemed to descend from the spaces between the stars. But it was too cold that night to sleep in the fields, when he knew where to find warmth. Like a fox in his hole, the child would creep into the corner where God had stored sleep for him. Back he went to the barn, gently trotting, and wormed himself through the cat hole While he's still little, he can get through this cat hole into the barn. The straw was gone, but he remembered the hay, and happily, for he was tired, there stood the ladder against the loft. Up he went, nor turned aside to the cheese, but sleep was common property still. He could have sleep without taking it from anyone. He didn't know they couldn't take the cheese before. He thought it was just common property. And he learned. He groped his way forward through the dark loft until he found the hay, when at once he burrowed into it like a sandfish into wet sand. All night the white horse, a glory, vanished in the dark, would be close to him. Behind the thin partition of boards, there's a white horse, right? He could hear his very breath as he slept, and to the music of it, audible signs of companionship, he fell fast asleep and slept until the waking horses woke him. What's it, Leia? Stop whining. Come here. Come. You want to sit up with me? Look around. Stop whining. I know I don't have your leash very long today. Chapter XVI, 16, Apprenticeship. He scrambled out on the top of the hay and looked down on the beautiful creature below him, dawning radiant against with the morning as it issued undimmed from the black bosom of the night. He was not perhaps just so well groomed as white steed might be. It was not a stable where they kept a blue bag for their gray horses, but to Gibbie's eyes, I don't know what that means, if that's like a fancy, oh, I hope no one needed this bench. But they're all wet anyway, so I don't know. I had to wipe it off with this blanket I brought. Thank you, God, for this place to read. I asked him for one for us today, so this is it. It's not a stable where they kept a blue bag for their gray horses, but to Gibbie's eyes, he was so pure that he began for the first time in his life to doubt whether he was himself quite as clean as he ought to be. This horse was so white, it made him question his own cleanliness. Interior, exterior, He did not know, but he would make an experiment for information when he got down to the burn. The burn is the little rivulet thing. Meantime, was there nothing he could do for the splendid creature? Far above, leaning over, he filled his rack with hay. But he had eaten so much grass the night before that he would not look at it, and Gibbie was disappointed. What should he do next? The thing he would like best would be to look through the ceiling again and watch the woman at her work. This is in the kitchen. He watches this woman come in and churn the butter and make the porridge and feed the men and sweep it all up and all these things. Well, we'll see. Anyway. Then, too, he would again smell the boiling porridge and the burning of the little sprinkles of meal that fell into the fire. He dragged, therefore, the ladder to the opposite end of the barn and gradually, with no little effort, raised it against the wall. Carefully, he crept through the hole and softly round the shelf, the dangerous part of the pass, and so on to the ceiling, whence he peeped once more down into the kitchen. His precautions had been so far unnecessary, for as yet it lay unvisited, as witnessed by its disorder. Suddenly came to Gibbie the thought that here was a chance for him, here a path back to the world. He wanted to serve again, Anyway, pendered daring by the eagerness of his hope. Oh, rendered, sorry. It was, the R is faded out in this old book, because this is an old book. Rendered, I was like, what's pendered? Rendered daring by the eagerness of his hope, he got again upon the shelf, and with every precaution lest he should even touch a milk pan, descended by the lower shelves to the floor. There, finding the door only latched, he entered the kitchen and proceeded to do everything he had seen the woman do as nearly in her style as he could. He swept the floor and dusted the seats, the window-sill and the table with an apron he found left on a chair, then arranged everything tidily, aroused the rested fire, and had just concluded that the only way to get the great pot full of water upon it would be to hang first the pot on the chain and then fill it with water, When his sharp ears caught sounds and then heard approaching feet, he darted into the dairy and in a few seconds, for he was getting used to the thing now, had clambered upon the ceiling and was lying flat against the joists. With his eyes to the most commanding crack he had discovered, he was anxious to know how his service would be received. Just imagine if someone came and did all your housework. You know, I did all this laundry yesterday. If someone had already done it for me. All right, we'll see what happens. When Jean Maver, she was the farmer's half-sister, opened the door, she stopped short and stared. The kitchen was not as she had left it the night before. She concluded she must be mistaken, for who could have touched it and entered? Then it became plain beyond dispute that the floor had been swept, the table wiped, the place redd up, and the fire aroused. Hoot! "Our mon here's been walking in my sleep," said Jean to herself aloud. "Or maybe that good laddie Donald Grant has been willing to get me helping for his mother's sake, a helping hand for his mother's sake, for his mother's sake. Honest woman, right? You'll see who Donald's mother is. The sun is coming out. Look. What? Can you see it? I'm not looking at where the camera. It better be on the camera. I'll make sure. Well, anyway, it was better be there. And the ants are still making their little line, but we don't need to worry about the ants, do we? That's like the ants in our life when we're in the hands of the creator of all the universe, right? The laddie's good enough for anything. Aye, gone to make a minister. Oh, it's like he's gonna make a minister of, like he could be a pastor. He's so good. There were good pastors back then, some, and I'm sure that I know there are some now. I know some, so that's good. You know, anyway, but Christ is our first. He's our first. He is the good shepherd and the good priest, the high priest of all priests and the high king of all kings. Teaches all of us how to be good kings and priests and not fall from the way of love. Anyway, eagerly, greedily, Gibbie now watched her every motion and bent upon learning. Nothing escaped him. He would do much better next morning. At length the men came in to breakfast, and he thought to enjoy the sight, but alas, it wrought with his hunger as to make him feel sick, and he crept away to the barn. He was so hungry. I just made a video with a song called Make It Happen, and at the beginning she said, it reminded me so much of Gibbie. She said it was Mariah Carey, and I don't normally listen to that, that pop of music, but regardless, the song came to me, so I trusted it, and it said something like, I barely had enough food to eat. Sometimes I went without and didn't have like working shoes on my feet. They're worn through, or small and full of fear. But if you get down on your knees and pray to the Lord, He's going to make it happen. We have to trust. He already did. He sent Christ. Anyway, He did make it happen, and we have everlasting life. So what more does anything else matter? In comparison, nothing does. Anyway, so he had to go away because he was so hungry. He would gladly have laid down in the hay for a while. Oh, wow. God is showing me something. Anyway. I won't say. I say so much. I'm just going to keep some to private with God. Anyway, at length the men came in to breakfast, and he thought he had to go because it was so hungry. He would gladly have lain down in the hay for a while, but that would require the ladder, and he did not now feel able to move it. On the floor of the barn he was not safe, and he got out into the corn yard, where he sought the hen house. But there was no food there yet, and he must not linger near, for if he were discovered, they would drive him away, and he would lose Donald Grant. What is it, Leia? Do you see a bunny rabbit? We saw little cottontails on the way over here. So cute. Leia, stop whining. Do you want to come up here? Come here. Come here. Leia. Do you want me to hold you? Then you got to just look at the birds. You don't get to run after them right now. I know that's your nature, but so he didn't want to lose Donald Grant, right? He had seen him at breakfast, for indeed he seldom during the summer had a meal except supper in the house. Gibbie, therefore, as he could not eat, ran to the barn and drank, but had no heart that morning for his projected inquiry in the state of his person. He must go to Donald, of his own person, like cleaning himself and all that. The sight of him would help him to bear his hunger. The first indication, just like the reading of this book, helps me bear whatever hunger I'm having to face in my life. Anyway, we're meant to anoint our heads with oil when we're fasting. When God calls us to fast in a certain way, God can help us through it. Just trust him. I know he's helped me through it. He can help you. He can make it happen. All of the it that's meant to happen in your life. The Psalm 139, there's a book written about you. Anyway, God help us live out our books and walk out the glory that you want to glorify yourself through us in this world. Anyway, the sight of Donald, of him would help him bear his hunger. The first indication Donald had of his proximity was the rush of this cow called Hornie, Hornie, past him in flight out of the corn. Gibbie was pursuing her with stones for lack of a stick. He didn't have a stick. Thoroughly ashamed of himself, Donald threw his book from him and ran to meet Gibbie. "You mustn't fling stones, creature," he said. "Hath it not fit for me fault though? It's my fault though." He's saying this. Look, if you know how to translate this for us, do so. There is a guy that has done so, but we have to pay for his book, and so we get what we get, and we don't throw a fit. Feel free to put it in the comments. And I'm just going to do my best to say what Donald said, because the captions will translate what I'm saying, and it's not going to translate that well anyway. Here I was sitting reading my books like a gawk that I am. I don't know what GOWK is. And letting the beast run wild among the corn. It's well paid for. And to have them out of it. I'm clean affronted with it myself, creature. Gibbie's response was to set off at full speed for the place where Donald had been sitting. He was back in a moment with the book, which he pressed into Donald's hand, while from the other he withdrew his club. This he brandished aloft once or twice, then started at a steady trot, speedily circled the herd, and returned to his adopted master, only to start again. However, the attack, this cow with horns on it. I'm just going to call it horn because, anyway, I'm just going to call the cow horn. If I can remember to. So Hardy's going around and gathering the cattle so Donald can read his book. So he's serving him. This he brandished aloft once or twice, then starting at a steady trot, speedily circled the herd and returned to his adopted master, only to start again. However, the attack horn, whom he drove from the corn side of the meadow right over to the other, she was already afraid of him. After watching him for a time, Donald came to the conclusion that he could not do more than the creature, he calls him, the creature, if he had as many eyes as Argus. Well, there must be like a weekend feature, I forget, like a mythological feature with lots of eyes, and gave not even one of them to his book. He therefore left all to Gibbie and did not once look up for a whole hour. Everything went just as it should, and not once all that day did Horn again get a mouthful of the bird. The braid, the corn. Oh, I gotta cover this for them. Oh, it's cold. Hold on. I brought my blanket though. I folded it up so I can wrap myself in it. Hold on. I'll block the wind in a second. Leia, don't you want to come sit with me? Oh, here. Oh, here's the blanket. Oh, she got tangled up again. It's starting to rain. Okay, I'm going to use the blanket over the... It's not... Let's see what we ought to do. Raindrops are falling on my head. And the book. Oh. All right. I think my camera will be fine. All right, I want to protect the book too. Okay, so so everything was just as it should, and not once all that day did Horn again get a mouthful of the corn. I don't know what braid, B-R-A-I-R-D. It must be the cornfield, right? A different name for it. It was rather a heavy morning for Gibbie, though, who had eaten nothing, but every time he came near, Donald saw the handkerchief bulging in the grass, which a little girl had brought and left for him. But he was a rare one, both at waiting and at going without. He wasn't going to ask him for it, you know. He's not, anyway, but he was so hungry. At last, however, Donald either grew hungry of himself or was moved by certain understood relations between the sun and the necessities of his mortal frame. For he had laid down his book, called out to Gibbie, "Creature, it's dinner time," and took his bundle. Gibbie drew near with sparkling eyes. There was no selfishness in his hunger, for at the worst pass he had ever reached, he would have shared what he had with another. Like Pavel Florinsky did in Siberia before he was martyred. Anyway, I love that man so much. He's inspired me so many times. Anyway, that's a man in real life that did that. I mean, but I know George MacDonald knew this hunger, or he didn't know how to write about it. Hold on, I have got to get you under a shield. Hold on. Leia's whining too. At last, however, Donald... Okay, so it's dinner time. There was no selfishness in his hunger, for at the worst pass he had ever reached, he would have shared what he had with another. But he looked so eager that Donald, who himself knew nothing of want, perceived that he was ravenous, and made haste to undo the knots of the handkerchief, which Mistress Jean appeared that day to have tied with more than ordinary vigor, ere she entrusted the bundle to the foreman's daughter. When the last knot yielded, he gazed with astonishment at the amount and variety of provision disclosed. "Losh!" he exclaimed, "the mistress must have known there were two of us." God knew, right? He little thought that what she had given him beyond the usual supply was an acknowledgment of the services rendered by those same hands into which he now delivered a share, on the ground of the other's service altogether. It is not always, even where there is no mistake as to the person who has deserved it, that the reward reaches the doer so directly. I don't know if this is touching you. It's touching me. Before the day was over, Donald gave his helper more and other pay for his service. Choosing a fit time when the cattle were well together and in good position, horn away at the stone dike, he took from his pocket a somewhat wasted volume of ballads, he called them, and said, "Sit ye down, creature, never mind the note. I'm going to read to ye. Gibbie dropped on his crossed legs like a lark to the ground and sat motionless. Donald, after a deliberate search, began to read and Gibbie to listen, and it would be hard to determine which found the more pleasure in his part, for Donald had seldom had a listener and never once so utterly absorbed. That's funny. That's sometimes my channel. Sorry, I don't mean to bring it back to me. My mom will listen to a whole video sometimes, and some people have really benefited, I know. But just like this book went to the wayside until this one lady in England or Scotland somewhere brought them back. She was a poet herself or something, I can't remember. No, Leia, no, you're getting all twisted. Ugh. Leia, shh. Are you cold? You okay? She's okay. Her leash is all twisted up again. She can go underneath. It's gonna be dry there. Okay, anyway. I think it stopped raining again, but my book is a little wet. Okay. For Donald had seldom had a listener and never one so utterly absorbed, even though he was reading the best books, you know. People don't always know how to recognize the best books. When the hour came for the cattle to go home, Gibbie again remained behind, waiting until all should be still at the farm. He lay on the dike, brooding over what he had heard and wondering how it was that Donald got all those strange, beautiful words and sounds and stories out of the book. He didn't know that words were written in there, you know. Chapter XVII, 17. Secret service. This is service that's done in secret, not the other stuff. I must not linger over degrees and phases. Every morning, Gibbie got into the kitchen in good time, and not only did more and more of the work, but did it more and more to the satisfaction of Jean, until short of the actual making of the porridge, he did everything antecedent to the man's breakfast. When Jean came in, she had but to take the lid from the pot, put in the salt, assume the spurtle, and grasping the first handful of the meal, which stood ready waiting in the bossy on the stone cheek of the fire, throw it in, and thus commencing the simple cookery of the best of all dishes to a true-hearted and healthy Scotsman. Oh my gosh, if you've ever had oatmeal in Scotland, it's the best. And their hot chocolate too. I've had it. I've had the privilege of having it before. I made sure when I was last there to get up early enough to go get porridge somewhere, and they have butter in it, and it's just, you know, you can put brown sugar and raisins and all this other stuff. Hold on, Leia's twisted up in this. Leia. Aw, it's reminded me of that song. Tangled up in you. Even the best fall down sometime. I try not to play it when I'm roller skating because I don't want to think about falling down. But it's funny and it's beautiful. Even the wrong words seem to rhyme. Sometimes, anyway. You and I collide. Thank you to whoever sings that song. I forgot who it is now in this moment. I'm sure I'll remember later. Maybe it'll be my song this week to teach on. I don't know. This is how it comes, you know. Because Leia's leash was tangled up in our stand. That's how the Holy Spirit works, just in case you didn't know. I'm sure you do know if you're here. Even if you don't call it the Holy Spirit's working in your heart. I know that. Cover me in sunshine. It's like this. It's cover me with your kisses, God. Help us to receive your love, your tenderness. It says, Jesus said, "Woe, I would like to gather you like a mother hen, but you would not have me. So have him. Arise." The prodigal son says, he says, "I shall arise and go back to my father." I was meditating on that this morning. That's when he comes to his senses. Because we can go back any moment. Anyway, I must not linger over degrees in the phases. Oh, I already said that. Okay, so, the best of all dishes to the true-hearted and healthy Scotsman or woman, right? Without further question, she attributed all the aid she received to the goodness, enough for anything, of Donald Grant, and continued to make acknowledgment of the same in both sort and quantity of victuals, whence, as he had been shown, the real labourer received his due reward, as we have been shown, not he, as has been shown. Until he had thoroughly mastered his work, Gibbie persisted in regarding matters economic from his loophole in the ceiling, and having at length learned the act of making butter, soon arrived at some degree of perfection in it. But when at last one morning he not only churned but washed and made it up entirely to Jean's satisfaction, she did begin to wonder how a mere boy could both have such perseverance and be so clever at a woman's work. For now she entered the kitchen every morning without a question of finding the fire burning, the water boiling, the place clean and tidy, the supper dishes well washed and disposed of on the shelf and rack. Her own part was merely to see that proper clothes were handy, to so thorough a user of them. She took no one into, cloths. I think it's the dishcloths, so he could wash the dishes, right? That they were tidy and there for him. Her own part was merely to see that proper cloths were handy, so thorough a user of them. She took no one into her confidence on the matter. It was enough, she judged, that she and Donald understood each other. And now if Gibbie had contented himself with rendering this house service in return for the shelter of the barn and its hay, because he's staying there for free in the hay, he might have enjoyed both longer. But from the position of his night quarters, he came gradually to understand the work of the stable also, and before long the men, who were quite ignorant of anything similar taking place in the house, began to observe, more to their wonder than satisfaction, that one or other of their horses was generally groomed before his man came to him, and often there was hay in their racks which they had not given them, and that the master's white horse every morning showed signs of having had some attention paid to him that could not be accounted for. The result was much talk and speculation, suspicion and offense, for all were jealous of their rights, their duty, and their dignity in relation to their horses. No man was at liberty to do a thing for any but his own pair. Even the brightening of the harness brass, in which Gibbie sometimes indulged, was an offense, for did it not imply a reproach, that they're not doing their job well enough, because they don't know what's happening. Many were the useless traps laid for the offender, many the futile attempts to surprise him, as Gibbie never did anything except for half an hour or so while the men were sound asleep or at breakfast. He escaped discovery, but he could not hold continued intercourse with the splendor of the white horse and neglect carrying out the experiment on which he had resolved with regard to the effect of water upon his own skin, and having found the result a little surprising, he soon got into the habit of daily and thorough ablution. So he saw that water cleans the horse, so he started cleaning himself in the water, in the river, or whatever it's called. But many animals that never wash are yet cleaner than some that do. And what was the... Leia, come back around. Oh, wow. Okay, anyway, I'll get her in a bit whenever we're done. We're almost done. And I know. Can you believe how fast this hour went, right? But many animals that never wash are yet cleaner than some that do. And what with the scantiness of his clothing, his constant exposure to the atmosphere, and his generally lying in a fresh lair, Gibbie had always been comparatively clean. Besides being nice in his mind, he was naturally nice in his body. The new personal regard thus roused by the presence of Snowball had its development greatly assisted by the scrupulosity with which most things in the kitchen, and chief of all in this respect the churn, were kept. It required much effort to come up to the nicety considered by Jean indispensable in the churn, and the croucher on the ceiling, which he saw the long nose advance to prosecute inquiry into its condition, mentally trembled lest the next movement should condemn his endeavor as a failure. I don't know what that is, but with his clothes he could do nothing, alas. But he bathed every night in the Lorry as soon as Donald had gone home with the cattle. Once he got into a deep hole, but managed to get out again, and so learned that he could swim. All day he was with Donald, and took from him by much the greater part of his labor. Donald had never had such time for reading. In return he gave him his dinner, and Gibbie could do very well upon one meal a day. He paid him also in poetry, right? Just like I'm paying you. And I don't have any way set up for donation except for if you want to go to yoursoulsongs.com and buy some classes. You can give in that way. That's set up. If you'd like. This is not for money though. Anyway. That's for my laborers as well, because I created those classes for us. Anyway, sorry, I lost where I was. Oh, he paid him also in poetry. It never came into his head, seeing he never spoke, to teach him to read. He soon gave up attempting to learn anything from him as to his place or people or history, for to all questions in that direction Gibbie only looked grave and shook his head. As often, on the other hand, as he tried to learn where he spent the night, he received for answer only one of his merriest laughs. Nor was larger time for reading the sole benefit Gibbie conferred upon Donald. Such was the avidity and growing intelligence with which the little naked town savage listened to what Donald read to him, that his presence was just so much added to Donald's own live soul of thought and feeling. From listening to his own lips through Gibbie's ears, he not only understood many things better, but perceiving what things must puzzle Gibbie, came sometime rather to his astonishment to see that, in fact, he did not understand them himself. Thus the bond between the boy and the child grew closer, far closer indeed than Donald imagined, for although still now and then he had a return of the fancy that Gibbie might be a creature of some speechless race other than human, right, like an angel, of whom he was never to know whence he came or whither he went, a messenger, perhaps, come to unveil to him the depths of his own spirit and make up for the human teaching denied him. This was only in his more poetic moods. I get in those, because I sometimes speak from such a high poetic place that people are like, what are you? I have many people, not many, but people have made comments as such, like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, when you're in this high place after reading Sir Gibbie for an hour, or, singing praise songs for 2 hours, or whatever they do at church, or taking the body and blood of Christ communion, you're in this aloft place. I can't always speak from there, or else people will think I live there. But anyway, it's not about me. This is a little, what's it called? Pro tips for you, or I forgot the word. What is the word? It's like a cautionary tale. Cautionary tale. That's what was coming to me. Something like that. Oh shoot! The book is falling apart. Oh, okay. I got it. And Leah's wrapped around this, so she's about to pull this over. Let's finish this sentence. Thus the bond. Okay, so make up for the human teaching denied him. This was only in his more poetic moods, and his ordinary mental position towards him was one of kind condescension. Right, he didn't know who he was condescending here. Let me see if this chapter ends. Yeah, it does. Bear with me one more page. It was not all fine weather up there among the mountains in the beginning of summer. In the first week of June even, there was sleet and snow in the wind, the tears of the vanquished winter, blown as he fled across the sea from Norway or Ireland. Then would Donald's heart be sore for Gibbie when he saw his poor rags blown about like streamers in the wind, and the white spots melting on his bare skin, of the snow. His own condition would then to many have appeared pitiful enough, but such an idea Donald would have laughed to scorn, and justly. Then most perhaps, then only, does the truly generous nature feel poverty, when he sees another in need and can do little or nothing to help him. Right? I see that all the time when people don't know about George MacDonald. They're in poverty. Well, they don't know the Holy Spirit that George MacDonald's conveying, and they don't realize they're in poverty, though. But sometimes we know. Anyway, I'll keep reading. Donald had neither greatcoat, plaid, nor umbrella wherewith to shield Gibbie's looped and windowed raggedness. Once, in a great pity, he pulled off his jacket and threw it on Gibbie's shoulders. But the shout of laughter that burst from the boy as he flung the jacket from him and rushed away into the middle of the feeding herd, a shout that came from no cave of rudeness, but from the very depths of delight, stirred by the loving kindness of the act, startled Donald out of his pity into brief anger, and he rushed after him in indignation, with full purpose to teach him proper behavior by a box on each ear. But Gibbie dived under the belly of a favorite cow. Like, the sun's out again, right? I knew. God told me it would. But anyway, you don't have to believe me. Like, just in my heart, he said, don't worry, just keep reading in the rain. Like, I didn't know that the sun would come out for sure, but I knew to just keep obeying. Anyway, and peering out sideways from under her neck and between her forelegs, his arms grasping each a leg. We're all meant to be like children. Jesus said we can't enter the kingdom of heaven unless we become like children. So I'm like, don't make fun of me. Anyway, while the cow went on twisting her long tongue round the grass and plucking it undisturbed, showed such an innocent countenance of holy merriment that the pride of Donald's hurt benevolence melted away, and his laughter emulated Gibbie's. That sort of day was in truth drearier for Donald than for Gibbie, for the books he had were not his own, and he dared not expose them to the rain. Some of them indeed came from Glashruach, the muckle house, they generally called it. When he left him, it was to wander disconsolately about the field, while Gibbie, sheltered under a whole cow, defied the chill and the sleet, and had no books of which to miss that use. So he's all dreary because he doesn't have his books, because he's used to them, just like if we were used to fine food and we didn't have them. But he just knew how to hide under a cow and not get the sleet and the... Anyway, he could not, it is true, shield his legs from the insidious attacks of such sneaking blasts as will always find out the unfended spots of the wind, right? But his great heart was so well to do in the inside of him that, unlike Touchstone, his spirits not being weary, he cared not for his legs. I don't know, it's capital Touchstone, so I don't know what author that is. Or anyway, the worst storm in the world could not have made that heart quail. For think, there had just been the strong, the well-dressed, the learned, the wise, the altogether mighty, considerable Donald, the cowherd, actually desiring him, wee Sir Gibbie, the cinder of the city furnace, right? Just the ashes of the city cast off, the naked and generally the hungry little tramp, to wear his jacket to cover him from the storm. Wow, right? Here's this man he looked up to, this boy who was giving him his jacket to cover him. The idea was one of eternal triumph, and Gibbie, exulting in the unheard of devotion and condescension of the thing, kept on laughing like a blessed cherub under the cow's belly. Nor was there in his delight the smallest admixture of pride that he should have drawn forth such kindness. No, it was simple glorying in the beauteous fact. As to the cold and the sleet, so far as he knew, they never hurt anybody. They were not altogether pleasant creatures, but they could not help themselves and would soon give over their teasing, like our rain did. That's Leah that's pulling on this, whatever. By tomorrow, they would have wandered away into other fields and left the sun free to come back to Donal and the cattle, when Gibbie, at present shielded like any lord by the friendliest of cows, would come in for a share of the light and the warmth. All right. Gibbie was so confident with the animals that they were already even more friendly with him than with Donal, all except Horn, that cow, who, being of a low spirit, therefore incapable of obedience, was friendliest with the one who gave her the hardest blows. That's too bad. That's a lesson in itself. All right, much love. The next time is chapter 18. We're going to read about the Bruni, God willing. I always say God willing. In my heart I say that. It's up to God. We don't know what's going to be at the end of this day. All right. Much love to all. Thanks for being here.